listening to. So if you go on social media and you feel empowered, you feel helped, you feel like you have tools, then that's a good thing. But if you're going on and you're comparing yourself, or you're listening to things that are disparaging, or you're listening to arguments and things that are making you feel distressed, then that's not so helpful. Like I have my the Alexa, the Echo Dot at my house, and Alexa will say, this terrible, absolutely frightening thing is going on in the world today. Want to hear more? I'm like,
No, I'd rather not, Alexa.
no, thank you. So like when she says, something that's encouraging and great in the world, which is hardly ever. And I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a setting that I have to do, then I'll listen. But you have to pick and choose what you're going to listen to and buy into with regards to social media. And the same thing with yourself. You have to pick
yeah.
and choose what you listen to with the voices in your own head.
Everybody, thanks for joining In Pursuit of Better. Today we have a really cool conversation with Tracy Taris. She's the author of Many Voices, One Truth. We dive into everything from the voices in our own mind and our external voices that kind of control the narrative of our life, to brain waves and how specific brain waves can affect everything from our mood to our mental state. So really powerful conversation with Tracy, and I appreciate her taking the time to discuss her book and all the things that she's learned, and talk a little bit about her practice and her community as well. So let's dive into the conversation with Tracy. All right, Tracy. Well, thanks again for taking some time today to chat. I like to start with guests to kind of get an understanding of what it is that you do and why you do it.
Okay. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I own a group private practice where I employ other therapists and interns. And what we do is provide psychotherapy services to children and teens, individuals, couples, and families. And the reason I decided to become a therapist is because therapy for me worked. I went to therapy to deal with some childhood issues, and it worked like a dream. And so I kind of felt like everyone needed this. And at first, I had no intention of becoming a therapist myself. I was referring people to my therapist and other therapists that I knew. And then one day I was at work, I was working for a consulting firm, and I had the distinct thought, you need to become a therapist. And it was weird, but it resonated. And so I called my husband and three of my closest friends and ran that idea by them. And they all thought, I could totally see you doing that, or that feels right, or you would be so good at that, and stuff like that. So I applied for a master's program, Azusa Pacific, and I wanted it to be a Christian master's program because I know that a lot of Christians are kind of leery of therapy and they don't trust psychology, and things like that. So I wanted to go there because they had an integration of faith and psychology sort of mindset and philosophy. And they teach their therapists and psychologists how to integrate a client's faith system, like mostly Christian, but whatever faith that they happen to be.
What was the impetus while you were working that made you have that thought of, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm supposed to do? Or was it feedback from others, or what prompted that spark in your mind?
I think it was the spirit.
Hmm.
I had turned on my computer and I noted that I had some messages to get to, but I decided to go to the kitchen to get some coffee. And I distinctly remember I had on a red suit, like a kind of like an Asian type top with, some, slacks. And I went into the refrigerator, and as I was reaching into the refrigerator, that thought popped into my head. And I had not been thinking of going to therapy or being a therapist or anything. It just
Right.
came literally out of the blue.
That's awesome. I just always wonder what kind of gets people to follow that path, because for a lot of people you think that it has to be this kind of planned out thing. And
Mhm.
as you just described, it's one of those things where it just kind of hits you and really speaks to you.
Yeah, I think it was a calling. I think I was called to that. which the more and more I thought about it made sense because I'm the eldest, of my siblings, and I took care of all of them. I mean, as best I could as a child and as a teenager and things like that. And I am that friend that people will call and run things by and try to get my perspective. And I'm a good listener. So I think I was just made this way, but never really had any intention on, never even had a thought of becoming a therapist.
Right. Was that always like a rewarding thing to you though? Like when someone would reach out and you feel like you're actually helping somebody, like even before you were, it was your job.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I didn't really think about it too much, like
Okay.
because I had been doing it since I was little, like listening, to people. Usually it was my siblings, like my one of my baby sisters would come in the summer from playing and, crying and saying someone did something as they were all playing out in the yard and stuff like that. And then I would just, help her and console her. And then if needed to be, go out and handle it, whatever the ruckus was. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. And then you kind of mentioned that we'll say religious in general, but Christians in particular, that they were hesitant to go to a therapist or see somebody. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's conditioning. I think that in the Christian community, a lot of us have been conditioned to not rely on the resources that God provides. Like a lot of times we demonize, and it's not all Christians, because I don't do this, and I know a great many people who do not do this, but looking in the media and watching interviews and seeing things out there, things are demonized, like things like meditation can be like, I think for the most part, the Christian community is coming out of that. But using meditation as an example, some of the greatest contemplatives of all time, and a contemplative person is a person that contemplates and meditates and thinks deeply on things of the world, things of nature, things of God, things of whatever it is they're reading. And a great many of them were mystics that were from the Christian faith, like the monks and stuff that would be at the abbey or whatever, that the monasteries, and so the idea of meditation is so grounding and so soothing. It trains your brain to operate more in alpha waves. Well, guess what? When you're praying, that's the waves that your brain go
Mm,
into. And the deeper and deeper you go, the deeper and deeper the waves. Like you might, so like alpha waves are the creativity waves, the relaxation waves, the waves that you want to be in before you go to sleep, which is why we have this sleep epidemic in our culture where so many people are not sleeping. And the reason is because they're trying to move from beta waves. They're trying to go to sleep in beta waves. Like beta waves are active, they're for working, they're for communication and things like that. And you have to transition into something more relaxing, which is alpha. So when you pray, your brain goes there. I mean, there's all kinds of research. And in people who are deeply contemplative and deep, go deep when they're in that state, can even get into some of the deeper, sleep brain waves like delta, theta and delta. And then of course there's gamma, but that's like super consciousness where it's like you are asleep but you're awake,
mm.
but in delta, in theta and delta you're asleep. Like delta is the non-dreaming. So I didn't mean to go off on that
No,
tangent,
that's
but
very
I
interesting.
yeah, I think that, as a group, people have been conditioned to believe things that are not true, like to say all you need to do is pray, or all you need to do, is read your Bible. And yeah, that's where you start, but God gave us all kinds of tools. And my book is full of that, like some of the tools that I've learned along the way, going to prayer retreats and just, I'm a contemplative myself, like just sitting down thinking thoughts and thinking about things of nature and of the word and things like that.
So let's dive into some of those tools. And I like the idea of, I've never really heard the different, like the Greeks for the different waves of the brain. So that's very interesting to me. But I want to ask specifically about sleep. Is that one of the things that you talk about with your clients about ways to reduce stress and provide clarity for them?
Yes, sometimes people will call, and sleep is one of my specialties. Sometimes people will call because they are having trouble sleeping, and it's, like they might have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, or they find themselves up at all hours of the night. And so, yeah, one of the things that I do when people first present with that as a presenting problem is I gather information about, what their daily life looks like. Are there any worries or concerns that's contributing to this? Because sometimes people will have something like a sick spouse or a
Mm.
kid that's gone off the rails or financial issues, and they don't realize that that's a connection to their sleep because they're perseverating and thinking about it and worrying about it. And that, if you're worrying and thinking, that's beta brain waves, because you're trying to sort something out. So you have to put that aside and get more into a creative space. A creative space relaxes you. Like if there's ever been something that you're working on and you lose time because you're in the flow, you're in alpha waves. That's a very relaxed. You're not tensed up like this painting, this great painting. You're relaxed doing that.
One of the things that you or your team sent was the stress threshold evaluation that you kind of came up with, and I was going through it, and you kind of realized that the higher you rank someone, or at least that number comes when it comes to stress, is more about the mental load that these worries have on somebody. So how do you use this tool whenever you're starting to build out a plan for somebody to help them, kind of reduce that stress in their life?
One of the first steps for anyone healing anything is awareness. And then diagnosis. Like you have to be aware that, okay, this is what's going on with me. This is the degree to which I've crossed my ability to handle stress, or I'm quickly approaching that threshold. Because your stress threshold, everyone has them. Like you don't hear a lot about it because even in our field, even in the field of psychology, most people only think of the stress threshold when they're working with patients who have psychotic symptoms. Because for someone who hears and sees and smells things that are not there, all of those symptoms will kick in if they have crossed their stress threshold. So you want to keep it down. You want to train them and teach them how to keep that down. But I noticed that after working with people with things like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, that you don't have to have schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder to cross your stress threshold. We all have it. And the threshold is the amount of stressors you can have on your plate before you start experiencing adverse reaction, before you pop, basically. And popping looks different for different people. For some people, they can't sleep. For some people, they engage in substance abuse, whether drugs or alcohol. For some people, it's shopping, spending money, overworking, a myriad of things. For some people, they become hostile. And, if they struggle with anger, that kicks in even more. If they struggle already with anxiety, that kicks in even more. And so what that threshold evaluation is designed to do is to help you look at what's been going on in my life. And you circle those numbers, the thing that matches you most closely, and then add it up. And the key at the back tells you whether this is normal everyday stuff, you don't have to worry about it, or whether you are approaching your stress threshold. So delegate some things or put some things on a back burner, or go and talk to someone or reach out for professional help. So it's kind of a guide to let the person know, okay, this is where I am. And oftentimes, especially if I've worked with someone that's dealing with anxiety or stress, like that's their treatment plan. Once we'll do one at the beginning, and then we'll do one in the middle part of treatment, and then at the end. But then I let them have one so they can evaluate themselves as they go along with life when they're not seeing me anymore. And then I tell them, if you get to this number, just give me a call so that we can, do a refresher or do a tune up or something like that. Don't let it get too high. Yeah.
What is the hesitancy maybe for people that get to a point in life where they feel these stresses and they feel like they're ready to pop, as you put it? Why would What's the most common reason that they kind of don't go to someone like yourself or don't seek out help? What stops
Yeah.
people from that?
So it could be a lot of different things. One thing is shame. Like people, I think in the therapy community, shame is more and more people are aware of that. And so shame prevents a person from coming in. Like they'll think that there something's wrong with me. If I have to go see a therapist, if I have to go talk to a psychologist, oh my goodness, something must be wrong with me. It might be values where in their family people talked about crazy people
Mm.
or something like that. It might be cost, because therapy can be, expensive and things like that. But even if it is cost, there are low cost, no cost situations out there. You just have to research them. You can check with faith communities, whether it's churches or temples or synagogues or whatever, and ask, is our group connected with anyone? Is there someone that I can go and see that would have the resources and tools to help me with this, but that would also be honoring of our faith and traditions and whatnot. But yeah,
No,
people hesitate for a lot of reasons. And,
yeah,
one of the biggest reasons, Jordan, is they know that if they go, they're going to have to talk about all this stuff. And they may not
yeah,
be up for that or may not feel that they're up for that.
yeah. Because even I mean, I think part of your book talks about the social aspect of like, well, I don't want someone else's opinion, and maybe that's why they hesitate. But I agree. I think that it's a lot of times what we're afraid of admitting to ourselves that we don't want to talk about to somebody else or even to ourselves. Like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of times we want to suppress those things and not admit them or even lie to ourselves about what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult. It takes a lot of courage to face yourself more. It takes more courage to face yourself than to face them out there, whoever they
Yeah.
are, a lot of times.
Well, how has the they out there, and more specifically like the social media aspect of it, where we get now to compare ourselves to the entire world immediately all the time, how has that impacted just mental health as a whole?
Well, I think that social media is one of the voices, or society is one of the voices in my book. And I talk about how society can be either good or bad, because there's a lot of people out there on different platforms offering a plethora of helpful
Mm,
tools. There's a lot of people out there doing good, rallying for different causes, rallying for the disenfranchised and people that don't have as much of a voice. And so there's that side. So it just depends on what side you're listening to. So if you go on social media and you feel empowered, you feel helped, you feel like you have tools, then that's a good thing. But if you're going on and you're comparing yourself, or you're listening to things that are disparaging, or you're listening to arguments and things that are making you feel distressed, then that's not so helpful. Like I have my the Alexa, the Echo Dot at my house, and Alexa will say, this terrible, absolutely frightening thing is going on in the world today. Want to hear more? I'm like,
mm. No, I'd rather not, Alexa.
no, thank you. So like when she says, something that's encouraging and great in the world, which is hardly ever, and I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a setting that I have to do, then I'll listen. But you have to pick and choose what you're going to listen to and buy into with regards to social media. And the same thing with yourself. You have to pick
Yeah.
and choose what you listen to with the voices in your own head, you know?
Well, that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. That we like to blame the internet and social media, but the algorithm only works based on what we pay attention to. And I don't know if it's just human nature to focus on the negative or what, but we
It
can
is.
change the things that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's brain chemistry. Like
Mm,
our brains are designed. We have our prefrontal cortex, which is up here. That doesn't really come into full development until about 25. And then we have our limbic system. I mean, there's other parts of the brain, but I'm just talking about the reason and the emotional one. Like the limbic part of the brain has this little thing called the amygdala, and the amygdala's job is to scan for danger 24/7. Like even if you're sleeping, if you've ever had a child standing over your bed and you suddenly wake up, it's not that your child is going to harm you, but the amygdala has detected that, okay, it's nighttime, you're sleeping, someone is standing over your bed.
mm,
So it will wake you up, and so people are drawn to the negative and the disparaging because there's a part of your brain that's always trying to alert you to danger and unsafety. And so what you have to train yourself is to say no to it. I mean, you need that part because when there is danger and there is unsafety, you need that information to be able to act. But most of the time, like if you're listening to television or social media, unless there is a storm going on and you need to know that you need to get to the store to get supplies, then you don't really need to listen to everything that's out there because it will have an impact on you. Like we were designed to survive. And so when all is good and we're at peace, we just kind of hang out. But if there's a slight something that threatens our safety and security, then we're, on red alert or we can go there.
Right. So your book is called Many Voices, One Truth. What are those voices that get into our mind? You've kind of alluded to a couple of them, but I want to get through kind of talk about the different voices that you discuss.
So when I was growing up, we had only 4 networks. There was cable, but we didn't have cable. We had ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS.
Right.
And so if you were listening to anything on television, you were tuned into one of those channels. And in my work with people, I noticed that most of us have 4 major networks that are, constantly playing in the background as well. And they are self, Satan, society, and savior. And all of these voices are, going on at any given time. And so in the book, I teach how to differentiate between the different voices and what they will be saying if that's the station you're tuned into and what it looks like. And then I give tools on how to turn some of these voices down to tune into truth, to tune into something that's edifying, to tune into something that's uplifting. And so with the voice of Satan and Savior, one is good and one is bad, and there's no vacillating between the two. But with the voice of self and society, there sometimes self is good and sometimes self is not so good, depending on your upbringing and depending on the belief systems you acquired over a lifetime. And same for society. Sometimes there's good news and good information and useful things out there, and then sometimes there isn't. So, even though self and society can vacillate between the 2 networks of good and evil can only be good or evil.
How do we recognize what those voices? Like which one's which? You know what I mean?
I'll give an example of each one. So you recognize them based on how you're feeling when you hear them. So if
Okay.
you're listening to, so say you're up for a promotion and there's a part of you that's like, you got this. And you start remembering some of the things that you've done and the things that you've accomplished, and you remember why you are qualified for this. That might be the self, or it might be the savior, saying, this is how I created you. You're well equipped. You have all you need. And the side of the self that's like, if you're thinking, I'm not good enough for this, so and so is going to get it, they're better than me. That's from information from your history that says you're not wanted or you're not good enough, and and there's a competition for that. Satan is very intrusive and loud and will have you trying to do things or doing things without thinking through. That's one of the main, if it's kind of like in the book, I said it's like a used car salesman, where act now, buy now, don't wait. Those kinds of thoughts could be from that. That could also be from the negative side of your own self. If you struggle with anxiety, and if you struggle with not having faith in yourself, right? Society's voice has to do with either information that's going to help you to improve, or information that's going to have you disparaging yourself, or doubting yourself, or comparing in a not so good way. And then the savior voice is always uplifting. It's always about truth. It's always about moving you closer to who you were created to be. So for instance, if this promotion is moving you to who you were created to be, if you were created to be like a leader, have a voice for other people, a spokesperson, then maybe this promotion is something that's going to either put you closer to becoming that or put you in the position of becoming that. And so like in the book, each one of those voices has a chapter, and I talk about this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like. And some of them I give examples from my own life, or examples, I make up examples of stories, so that people can see what it looks like in some of the chapters. And then I give tools for tuning in or tuning out, to recognize, whether it's tools on how to have a better relationship, whether it's tools on how to center yourself and quiet your mind. Pretty much every chapter has a tool. And then it ends with what a day in the life of using some of those tools look like.
How did you come up with these four voices? Like, is this from your own experience, like in being able to identify them yourself, or through talking with
Yeah.
clients? Like, what was the development path like?
And being able to differentiate them myself, and also noticing other people, whether it's clients or friends and family, talking with people, because because I'm a therapist, and I think I did this before I was a therapist. I listen below the surface. I'm also a writer, so
Mm.
I can hear the story behind the story. Before I was a therapist, my first job, my first career was journalism. And so I did, I had to collect stories and write stories, for the newscast. And so sometimes, I mean, as a reporter, I could go and get the story of whatever the story is, but I can also get what's behind the story. What's the story beneath the story that would be more interesting for the public.
Is this your first book?
This
Even
is
though
my this is my first completed and
okay.
published work. Like I have other things that's written, like screenplays, and there's a
Mm.
novel I've been working on for like 20 years. Yeah, I know. And so, but I've been really encouraged by this, because now I know that I can do it, and I
Yeah.
know that I am publishable. I didn't self-publish. I went through the traditional route, and things like that. So yeah,
What?
it's my first one, but it's not my last one. I'm working on a book proposal for my second one right now.
That's awesome. What inspired you to do it? I mean, I guess if you're a writer, you always kind of wanted to, right?
Oh yeah, I've always I would spend my summers as a child and teenager in Louisiana reading.
Nice.
Like I would have a stack of different books that I would get through, sitting on my grandmother's porch reading, sitting in the living room, any place I can find a cool spot and read. But yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer.
I'm gonna switch back to the content a little bit. How does these voices come up in relationships? So like you work, with married couples, and I'm assuming with like the parent-child relationship if you're helping children. So how does are these voices, these four voices, and then our reaction to them kind of surface in our relationships with others?
I think primarily due to the amygdala, because, and remember, the amygdala is the part of the brain that's always scanning for safety. The amygdala wonders if its needs are going to be met, or wonders, not your needs are going to be met, wonders if you're safe. And so when we're in relationship with people and we're relating, we're always either making a deposit or a withdrawal in that relationship. It was, I forget the name of this author, but he wrote this book called His Needs, Her Needs.
Mhm.
And in it, he talks about the concept of the love bank. And in the love bank, we're always either making deposits or withdrawals. So if you're in a situation with a loved one and there's deposits being made, then, all is well, all is safe. The amygdala doesn't have anything to worry about. But if there's withdrawals being made, and the withdrawal can just be something as simple as a disagreement about something, or it could be an all out, argument about something. And so that's when the cacophony of voices may start, like in the form of thoughts, like, he doesn't have my best interest in heart or at heart, or he always does this, or she always says that, and things like that. And you can end up getting your brain hijacked on those thoughts. So in my practice, I use a form of therapy called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I teach clients how to become more aware of the thoughts they're having, because thoughts can just kind of assault you and bombard your mind. And if you continue to go in that direction, the feelings that match those thoughts are also, mounting and getting bigger. And if you get too far down the road, you enter this state, especially if you struggle with anger and I think also with anxiety, you get to the state where you can't bring yourself back down. You've ratcheted up so much that at this point you either have to physically separate yourself from the situation or let it ride out, so.
Is it because of the amygdala that we kind of get like that defensive nature too, where it's like almost like if someone's arguing with us or pressing us on something, it's like an attack?
Yeah, because it becomes more about you getting your defense is you defending yourself, you getting your needs met, and one of the things I teach people is how to communicate. When someone brings a communication to you, it's their problem. Don't make it about yourself. Like if and they might be saying you are the problem, but
Hmm.
even if you are the problem, it's still not about you. It's about their perception of you, right? It's about their experience of you. So the best thing that you can do is take in that information, consider it, stop yourself from being, offended by it. And, because the minute you feel offended, you're going to defend yourself. Or if you do feel offended, save that defense, like let yourself take in the information of your loved one or the person that you're in communication with so that you can stay in the mindset of hearing them out. Because after you've heard them out and they feel heard, you can clarify or clear up, and it could be a much more peaceable interaction, that because if you get offended and then you defend yourself, then you're making it about you. And so what your amygdala is doing is trying to, telling you you're unsafe, which most of the time you're not unsafe because it's just somebody's opinion, you know, and then you act on that trying to get yourself to be safe, but you're just going to make it worse.
How do we get consistent in like, so this is kind of a longer form question, but I'm assuming we have to go through kind of a self training to be able to like communicate well or recognize what's going on whenever we have these interpersonal relationships. And for someone like myself, it's easy after it's like, well, I just talked to Tracy, so now I understand how to do that, or I have a better understanding of how to do it, but then it kind of fades away, right? So how do we, what are tools that we can use to kind of stay consistent in our self reflection and our understanding of how to handle these difficult conversations with others? How do we kind of keep that a higher baseline than just falling back to our normal patterns of behavior?
Making it a part of your life, just as you would make taking vitamins a part of your regular routine, just as you would make exercising a part of your regular routine.
Okay.
So the reason you fall off is your brain, like our brains are designed, loves patterns, and habits. Our brain will default to whatever is habitual. And so one of the things that you have to do is whatever it is you've decided to implement, how they say it takes 21 days to form a habit.
Mhm.
Well, current research says it takes a lot longer than that. It takes like 63 days for most things. And in some things, it takes longer than that, like
Wow.
263 days. And so what that means is at that first 21 days, your brain is like, oh, okay, there's something new here, and is open to this new thing because you've been working on it for 21 days. But if you stop after that 21 days, it's just going to go back to whatever is the habit. It requires another 21 days for that groove in the neural pathways in your brain to develop a new groove. And then another 21 days to solidify it, to make it automatized and make it habitual. And I would say, like, even after 2 months of it, because 63 days is about 2 months, even after, like, be mindful and continually put into practice whatever it is you've decided to put into practice. So, for example, if you're going to enter weightlifting contest, right? You're not going to just show up on weightlifting day and try to lift your body weight.
Mhm.
You're going to, week in and week out, months before the competition, pick up weights. You might start with 5 pounds. I mean, way more than that if this is your world, but you might start with 5 pounds and then the following week you move to 10 pounds, 15, 20, whatever. So that by the time weight day comes, you can easily lift that, and so using that analogy, maybe what that looks like for you is, or for anyone, one of the things I tell my clients is the quality of your day begins the night before. So
Mm.
having an evening routine that gets you from beta waves to alpha waves, and I'll send you a chart that I wrote on that so that you can have it, but that gets you from from beta waves to alpha waves. And so that evening routine might be, after work, you do some meditation. Like I'll meditate right over there before I go home. And then go home, have dinner, and have time with your family, but then have an evening and bedtime routine where you do the same thing every night to get yourself in a relaxed state before going to sleep. And then the next morning, it might be something that you have a prayer time, you have a meditation time, you might read scripture or encouraging spiritual material, you might go for a run or exercise, and taking time throughout the day to either meditate or just sit quietly, inviting silence at different intervals during the day. Because what you're doing is, just as you're lifting those weights, 5, 10, 15 pounds, and you're shaping your arms and you're shaping your legs and you're, strengthening your core, when you do all of these peaceful things, you're developing peace in your inner being. And so you want that to become your new default. Like, it doesn't mean that you won't ever get angry or stomp around or, be mad at somebody or something like that. But if peace is more, is cultivated within your way of being, then it becomes more of a default than knee-jerk reactioning to someone's offensive comment or behavior.
All right. So what are some of those calming rituals look like? What's an example of what we can do kind of before bed to switch those mind waves over?
So I'll share some of mine. Like my husband and I, like in the evening, we'll have, and we just have one more child at home. We're practically empty nesters. And so, but she's 18 and she has her
Mm.
own life. So, she's not going to be sitting around with us all the time. So we'll have our dinner, and we'll talk about, either roses and thorns of the day. Like, what's the rose of the day for you and why, and what was a thorn? And we talk about that. And then around from 7:30 to 8:30 is our learning time, where we're engaged in something that we're learning. He's a musician, I'm a
Mm.
writer. And so we either learn something together or we learn something separately, but in the same room, because we realized, or I realized, that we were watching too much TV in the evening. And one of the reason is because we wanted to be together, like we wanted to connect. And so sitting there watching TV was how we would do that. And so we changed it to from 7:30 to 8:30, learning something. And then after that, it's just relaxation. So for me, I might do some yoga or some stretching. I might read a novel that I've been reading. And while we're doing all of this, the lighting in the house is really muted, kind of like that light back there,
Okay.
having like yellowish lights. You don't want to have like blue lights, like white, bright blue lights, because in the evening, around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the melatonin in your system starts to rise and the serotonin starts to go down. So when the sun starts going down, like our bodies are set rhythmically to the sun. So when the sun goes down, the melatonin in our body rises, and when the sun comes up, the serotonin in our body rises and the melatonin goes down, and vice versa. And so I might have muted, lighting around the house, whether it's candle, I might have soft music playing and reading and just sitting and relaxing. I might do my hygiene routine, like taking a bath or shower or something, and then getting into bed, and we might talk a little bit or whatever. And then in the morning, same thing. I set my coffee pot to go off, or I do I like the French press. I'll
Mm.
set the tea kettle to use the water. And the lighting is like this. Like my husband, he gets up and he likes really bright light right away, and I don't. I'll do the really bright light to wash my face and brush my teeth because I'm trying to wake up, but then I'll have everything muted again. And I might read the Bible or a spiritual book that I'm working on. Right now I'm working on something called The Imitation of Christ, where you learn how to, think through and orient your attention to what matters. And what matters is your relationships, whether with the people in your life or with God and whatnot. I pray. I might do some kind of exercise, either go to the gym or run or something like that. But all of those things, they promote alpha brain waves. All of those things promote relaxation. And then I enter into my day. Like, I have a private practice, so I set my own schedule, and I don't really start seeing clients until like 1 o'clock, 1:30. So my entire morning is free. So I could do whatever I want. But for people that that's not the case for them, what I would recommend is waking up a little earlier so that you can have 45 minutes to an hour of things that are just relaxing and quieting of your mind and your spirit, so that you can enter your workday, in a more relaxed state instead of frenetically, rushing around the house, getting this and that together, and then running out the door so that you're not late.
I really appreciate you kind of going through that entire routine. But what strikes me is that it's in my mind, it was like a 10-minute routine before bed, but it's a more of a lifestyle for you to kind of be at
Yeah.
the inner peace level, right?
Yeah. And you can start with 10 minutes. Like when I'm teaching my clients sleep hygiene, I always tell them to start with 15 minutes. So like if your bedtime is 10 o'clock, at 9:45, turn off all the lights, go
Hmm.
get ready for bed, do something soothing. And then you want to, when you feel good about that, add another 15 minutes. So maybe eventually it's 9:30, but you want to work your way to 45 minutes to an hour.
I want to, because I keep going back to this because it just seems so important when we're talking about getting like the good sleep. And what time is it that, so because you talked about after dinner and then you were going to bed, but how much sleep do you try and get each night before like you're setting that alarm, not really an alarm, but for the coffee pot to go off?
My sweet spot is 7.5 hours.
Mm,
Research says anywhere for people, anywhere from 6 hours to 9 hours, depending on your rhythm and depending on your lifestyle. There's been times when what I need is 8 hours.
yeah.
And there's sometimes when what I need is 9 hours. But I've trained myself. And like I said, like I don't have a normal schedule. Like I don't
Right.
need to get up to get in the car at 7 o'clock, but I do get up. I get up at around between 5 and 6 o'clock. But I've trained myself so well that I don't really need an alarm clock. I wake up when I'm done, when my body is rested and my spirit is rested, and I'm ready to face the day. I wake up. And so most of the time I'm waking up around 7.5 hours, between 7 and 7.5 hours. But during times of stress or high productivity of work, it might be longer than that. And I just let it be.
And then when we talk about the alpha and the beta waves, are those, whenever you say wave, is that truly like a wave that's measured, like if they were doing a study of your brain, or is it more of a like is it an area of your brain? Is it a type of electrical signal? What are those waves?
Yeah, it's electrical signals in your
Okay,
brain, and there's people that have equipment that can measure them. So beta
gotcha.
has three different levels. Like right now, we're in level one because we're just having a conversation. There's no threat, there's nothing pending. Level two might be like if you start getting nervous because we should be wrapping it up and it's going a little long or something like that. There's a little bit of anxiety, but it's not necessarily a threat. And three would be high conflict. You might be arguing with someone or stuck in traffic, so I think learning to identify which level of beta you're in is good, because then you can calm yourself down even in beta.
Mm.
And then transitioning to alpha in the evening during your evening routine, because when you first start falling asleep, those are the alpha waves, but you don't have to be asleep to be relaxed. You can be relaxed while awake.
Are there levels to the alpha, or is that just a relaxed, peaceful state in
It's a
general?
relaxed, peaceful state. And then when you fall asleep, when you're asleep and dreaming, that's theta. And then when you're deeply asleep and there's no brain waves, that's delta. And sometimes
Okay.
I mix those two up, but I'm going to send you a chart so
Okay.
that you can see, yeah, what they
Now
are.
we'll put a link to that too, in the show notes that everybody can kind of see that. Is there resources? I don't know. I should be better, but is there somewhere that people can find more information like that from you?
Mhm. My website tracytaris.com, and that's TracyTaris.com. And you can subscribe to my email subscription list, and there you'll find information like this, where you'll receive an email from me, but you can also just go on and see some of the things that I've either put up as freebies or whatever.
Awesome. So, I know we will wrap up soon, but I wanted to give you a chance to I like to end with some action items for people. And we can kind of go back to the book where we talked about, we recognize these voices. You're going to teach us how to, recognize, overcome, and kind of move on. So what are some action items or advice that you give somebody to start to that process of, hey, I want to be more in the alpha state. I want to, kind of calm my life and become more peaceful. What would you tell someone?
Well, I would say, if with your listening to this interview, anything that has been talked about, put it into practice, because information is just information until we utilize it in our lives. And so, just as you go to the gym, whether you're going for physical health and fitness, or you're going for emotional and mental health and fitness, doing things every day, like whatever it is you decide to do. Like in my book, there's several different exercises that you can do in order to promote calm and peace in your life. I think the number one things are things like prayer, things like meditation, things like reading spiritual material, and then thinking about it, like contemplating, what did I just read? Like one of the exercises in my book, I use the READ as an acrostic, because you are reading. So the R means you read something, but then you reflect on it. What does this mean for me? What's coming up for me as I'm thinking about this? What can I get out of this? And E means envisioning, if I apply this, what I just read, to my life, or if I applied this thing that, as I was reflecting, this thing that came up, what would my life look like? So if in reflecting on whatever it is you read, the thing that comes up for you is taking 10 minutes of just quiet and stillness and silence, envisioning yourself doing that, like imagining, using your imagination to see yourself doing that every day, and then envisioning the peaceful countenance you would have, like the peaceful look on your face. Like, we all know people that always look angry and frustrated, and we all know people that always look like they're at peace. They just have this laid back look on their face. So envision what that would look like for you. The A is for action or apply. What is one thing I can apply or act on from this thing that I just read? And D is determine to do it. Like a lot of times we have an intention, we might intend to apply something, but you have to determine, you have to resolutely set out to do whatever it is that you've learned. And so whatever tools you receive from the book, or from this conversation, or from anything that you find out there or are exposed to, put it into practice, and put it into practice. At least give yourself 2 months of putting it into practice, because we have a habitual brain, and you'll lapse back into whatever is your normal habit or routine if you don't.
I think that was really powerful too, because it's like I have always been a big reader, but a lot of times you do it just for the sake of reading, and it's all that information is only as good as you put it into practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But hey, Tracy, I can't thank you enough for diving into this. I really appreciate the time and the expertise, and I can't wait to dive into the book a little bit further.
Okay. Yeah, enjoy and apply. Find some things that you apply.
For sure. Thanks again, Tracy.
You're welcome.